Okay. Okay, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soccer Performance Podcast. We have an interesting guest today, Danya Barsalona. Danya is Canadian. She has a pretty extensive career playing all over the world, starting in Canada. She'll go in more detail, but playing in the US and then in Europe, and currently works as a sports broadcaster. She has uh, you know, tons of different experience and stories and insights for any players or parents or coaches at home. And I'm sure she'll provide good content. Daniel, welcome. And how's it going? Would you be able to, tell us your story?
All right. First of all, thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be on your podcast. Um, yeah, so my name's Danya Barsalona, of course. I was born in Canada. So grew up in Canada playing football. I'm gonna say football because I live in Europe, or I can say soccer. From a young age. Obviously, my parents are Italian, so for us, that's like the number one thing. And got into the provincial and national team programs. From there, I went on a full scholarship to play D1 in the US. I went to the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And then from there, I got the opportunity to play professionally in Europe, where I went. And I played, I'm thinking back now. I played first in Italy in Serie A. I played in Spain, which was Primera División, which is like La Liga for women. I played in Norway's top Syrian, then Germany, Canadian national team. And I mean, I had the opportunity to play for Italy, but because of documentation, obviously that didn't work out. But yeah, it was a very long process. And then that football experience helped me to transition into my career in sports journalism or football journalism, let's say. And that's where I am today. So I still play in Germany, and now I'm also a sports journalist. So
Cool. There's a lot there. Where to
yeah.
begin? Um, so cool. I didn't know you played in all those different countries in Europe. What was it like? I guess first of all, transitioning. I guess you went directly from college after graduating right into Italy, or how was that transition, and what was like the culture shock like?
Well, so after I finished, I graduated university, I got called into the Canadian national team again. And because there was kind of like a gap from when our college season ended to when the national team was getting back together, it was suggested I learned of the possibility that I was going to be able to go and play professionally in Europe, which I didn't really know that was even an option at the time. Like it just never really occurred to me that as a woman you could be a professional in Europe. Um, but when I got to Italy, I mean, I'm Italian. I come from an Italian family in Canada, but I'd never lived in Italy before, and it was it was definitely a big culture shock. I was in Udine, so that's the north of Italy. And I think for me, the biggest thing was actually there were two things. So the way football is seen, so the training methods, how intense in Italy they are into tactics, how they read the game, how they study the game. It was so much more intense, and I learned so much in the span of 1 year, just through these little small things that maybe nobody had ever told you in Canada or the US, and just different ways of approaching the game. Of course, Italy tactically, we know that it's that's the main focus. So of course it was like a great place to go to learn. And then also, things in the locker room, let's say, how different football is in Europe and in North America. In North America, my teammates were my best friends. We were a family. We went out together. We were just best friends, and every week you were happy. If you were off the field, you were happy that your team was winning. Some people, I mean, you want to play, of course, but you're still cheering for the team. Everyone has this, great team spirit. And in Europe, like that is not the way it is, you know, like you get there and you have arrived and now you're getting paid and you are taking the spot of somebody else. You're making more than somebody else. And that creates this kind of, you know, animosity sometimes and a lot of competitiveness. Some people were not very nice. You know, it's a very different, it's much more cutthroat in Europe. And when you make that transition into professional sports, so those for me were the two things that I was like, okay, this is, you know, I'm not in North America anymore.
Okay, cool. Juan, anything there you want to ask?
No, I think it's a good insight. I mean, I think we wanted to have you on because you are somebody who's made that jump and who's kind of gone through that route where most girls are looking to go to, D1. I don't know how many want to take it beyond D1, right? It seems very common that, and which is completely fine to use your football at least to get your education. But I think there's so many opportunities that there's a lot of girls that I think maybe don't believe that they can be in Europe and they can be in these countries. And it's a good testament that you really can, be at those countries. It's going to take a lot of adapting, but you said it best. I think it creates this competitiveness, but I think, we're so shy from that with how we kind of approach our development that I find that a lot of players maybe can handle it on a technical level, tactical level, but just the fact of being in a different country, the fact of realizing that you're trying to take something from somebody, I think that catches a lot of girls off guard, girls and guys. And so it's important that I think we bring people like yourself that can kind of give a very personal anecdote to that theme, because I find that a lot. You get to 17, 18, 19, and then you have the level, but then whether it's culture, whether it's being away from home, those little things end up really making the defining factor, I find. So I think that really resonates with me. I was wondering, in terms of, I mean, you were on the Canadian national team. The reputation there is obvious. You got to see football in Italy. What do you find, it really differentiates between the two cultures and the two styles of play?
Well, I think number one, the tactical awareness and the way the game is read. Of course, in North America, it's no secret that for a long time, less now, and this is changing, of course, but we were very focused on athleticism and, running fast, jumping high, being strong. And when I was coming up through the youth teams, for example, I'll never forget this. We played against Germany in a 3-game series, and we ended up tying the series, win, loss, tie. And we beat Germany through sheer just willpower, muscle, and force. But I remember watching some of those girls play, who actually my path ended up having me cross with them again later on. But I just remember how technical they were. They used to play the ball on the ground, complete passes, touching, moving, and we were more focused on, short, long, short, long, run. And that for me was a very big, I mean, growing up in a European family, I always kind of watched Serie A and, in the glory days of Serie A. So my, taste for football was a little bit more dribbling, a European style. But that was a very big difference for me. Just the way that they understood the game and the way that, tactically formations, positions, changing in a game. And when I was younger, it never happened that we went from a 4-4-2 to a 3-5-2 in a game. Never. In Europe, though, during a game, you change formations. Maybe you're shifting. Your approach changes. You press high. You drop back. In Canada, when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. So
I find, and something that just came to mind is it just seems so unsustainable to play let's call it the long game, right? The kick and chase game, or the physical game. It just seems unsustainable to produce that same level of outcome. And if that's how you're going to beat teams, what an exhausting way to beat teams, right? Like, what an exhausting style of play. That's where I find that, like you said, and it seems like there's this goal to get to that physical, status, where at the end of the day, the best teams let the ball run. The best teams nowadays, we're starting to see that kind of even out. But forever, the ball is always going to be faster than any player. And so I find that a lot of Canadian culture, whether that's, we always have a lot of guests that preach that maybe coaching development here isn't at the level that it could be, to show players that you really don't need to be this like physical specimen to play the sport, right? And so I find that that's such a good takeaway. If you are a young player listening, if you're a young woman, young man, whatever it is, and you can just understand, and we try to hit that message home, that the sharper you are on the ball, right, the more likely you are to open doors. You can always improve your physical attributes, but it's very difficult to get back the time that you, let's say, waste as a young player, you're not focusing on those things, right? Mayor, would you agree? Anything there?
No, definitely. And I think that just blends in with everything we've been talking about on previous episodes. And, Danya's, our couple European coaches that we spoke to, they highlight the importance of the mental strength and competing every day and fighting for your spot every day. And so when Danya brought that out, I wonder, I mean, Juan, you and I saw it growing up. Danya, you probably saw it growing up in Canada. There isn't really that mindset of every day is a battle and every day I'm fighting for my spot. Like you said, it's more everyone's friends and whatever. So I think that's I don't know, is that just kind of like a North American cultural thing? Did you see the same in America? I don't know. What do you think? And then also I was wondering, we'll start with there, then I have another question.
All right. So I think there's a lot of, yes, there is competition in North America, 100%. But we still have this belief, I think, in North America, and I still see it because, I go often back home where I have friends that train players, and I often help them out and stuff like that. And they just, I feel like people think that if they're good, they're gonna make it, and that's all they have to do is just be better. But there's so much more to being a professional football player than just being good. And that, I think, is that, we have a lot of parents who are very willing to take their kids to one-on-one training sessions, gym sessions, skill sessions, this and that and the other. And then, when their coach doesn't play them, they're kind of complaining. Whereas like, in Europe, it's kind of like, well, if you're not playing, you're doing something that's not enough. That means you have to bring more. And the mentality is that, like, because there's money involved, because you get paid, where in North America you pay, but in Europe you're getting money, you're getting paid. So like you're an employee of the team. You have to do this for that team because they're investing in you financially. And I think like the level of competitiveness obviously increases because, some teams, if you're a male in a lower league, for example, you're not making those millions and millions, but the club is investing in you considerably. So like, if you're not sharp enough for a little while, that's it. You're gone because the investment's not worth it. And I think that's where this kind of competitive culture comes from that we don't have in North America, really, because we don't, when I was young and playing for, maybe Burlington or Dixie or Salfleet, my parents were paying the club to have me play there, of course, just like every other kid. So if I'm paying, that gives me the kind of the power almost to be like, hey, you have to play me. I'm paying money to be here, Whereas the other way, it's like, hey, if you're not bringing enough, you're gone because I'm paying you, And I think that's a lot where it comes from.
It's so true.
Yeah. That the issues with the pay to play system, like the issues go really deep. And I think you highlighted there. And especially now with how much it costs now, like back in the day, it wasn't that bad, but now it's like crazy money. And I mean, in fairness, yeah, if you're paying that money, you will feel entitled, like, yeah, I deserve to see some sort of return on that, playing time, some results and this and that. But there's no match with that, right? And that system also doesn't create that highly competitive environment, rather than does the opposite, creates like a more entitled environment. I guess you could say.
I mean,
So yeah.
Here you're also competing against, like in Canada, I mean, I've heard now what the cost is to have kids play competitive football, and it's like staggering for me. Here, you're playing against, in Canada, your parents kind of have to be wealthy in order to allow you to play at that level. In Europe, you're getting kids coming from all over. Some kids have nothing but their skill, and they know that this is their only chance at having any kind of, making any kind of future or achieving their goals. And so there's hunger. There's real hunger, like, and people just fighting for, they'll take whatever they can get, any chance they can get, and they're willing to like give everything they have and make massive sacrifices in order to be able to make it. And I feel like in Canada we have this kind of comfortable situation where my parents are going to pay $6,000 and I'm going to go to teams and tournaments and go to the US, and I think that just, it takes away a little bit of that hunger. And so when players go to Europe, some of them don't make it because they're not used to that kind of fighting mentality, and the others that some people do make it, of course, but it's a wake up for them a little bit.
I think that we, like, as a whole culture, as a whole country, we push for this inclusion and this, everybody's welcome, which from a wide lens, it's a good incentive. But when you narrow in, the more there's no standard and the more everyone should get something, then you're automatically killing competition, right? You don't have to do anything anymore to get something. And so I think because people don't want to see their child, suffer, or they don't want to see their child be upset. And it's, of course, I'm sure it's a maternal instinct to go and like save that player or that kid from that situation. And you don't realize what you're doing, right? You don't realize like that you're a product of your environment. That's as simple as I tell players, like, how are you going to be anything, right? How are you going to be like a lion if you train with mice? Like if you're with little fragile players, how are you ever going to develop if you're always playing your age? How are you ever going to get outside of these, comfort zones? It's impossible. And I think it's starting to get to a point so deep that people are having to go outside of the traditional system in everything, because there's a level of acceptance that it's just, realistically, it's just unacceptable for some people. And I find that at the end of the day, you just have to pick and choose, where you spend your money. Because, I run a facility, I run a business. I try to make it as accessible to everybody, but you're still fighting against the cost of operation. And so you realize there's a fine line, right? Nobody's doing anything for free. Everybody's doing anything to get by and to get along and to make a living. And the truth is, it's if it's looked at as an investment, not just as like a hobby, but people are upset because it's quite an expensive hobby, right? But you have to really put it. I still tell players, like, yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's difficult, but all those things are not your responsibility as the player. Do your job, right? Like, whether it's expensive or not, show up. And I think parents need to be more aware. If your child is having a difficult time really playing the sport to the fullest, maybe he doesn't like the sport, or maybe she doesn't like the sport. Maybe you need to be a little bit more self-aware. And I think the system just kind of keeps getting fed, because people are just kind of in this like zombie mode. You know what I mean? Sorry for my long-winded.
Yeah, everyone needs it. No, it's true though. I mean, I think also it is nice to have these kind of services that, you guys provide, to have this one-on-one training and all that. That's all really fantastic tools. If you can afford it, cool. If you can't, okay, you can, there's also things you can do on your own. You don't have to have a trainer. If you have the luxury to be able to have you guys, for example, that I think is great. And I'm not going to hide it. I mean, for me, the North American fitness strength training mentality really gave me an advantage coming over here, because, at my age, which is a little bit older than the average football age, let's say, I'm still one of the fittest people on my team. I don't really get injured very often. I've had a very long career, and that is 100% in my mind because of the work that I learned on the athletic side from North America, from playing in the US, from playing in Canada, strength training, injury prevention, all that kind of stuff. Whereas here, there's a lot of players that don't take that and use it. So I think like it's an amazing and fantastic tool to have. but it's like a 360-degree picture, and you have to have kind of all of it. And if you have, the mental side that Mario was talking about, and you use, these tools that you guys give, then you can really have a lot of potential. But with one part and not the other, you're not going to make it. You know what I mean? So.
Well, Mario and I talk about that all the time. Like, it's become standard that an 8-year-old has a trainer, and I am that. You know what I mean? And we're all taking that role, whether it's a 8-year-old. Like, I'm happy the fact that it's at that age. But like you said, it's not the end all be all. It seems like a lot of players that don't love the game have trainers trying to learn that passion, learn that drive. Like, I don't play the guitar for a reason. I don't like it enough, right? And so at a certain point, you can't force me to take these guitar lessons. And I think a lot of players are stuck in that, and a lot of parents are frustrated because they might like soccer or football or whatever, or hockey, but their child doesn't really have that same level of passion. And I think, yes, of course, if you're like, it's so frustrating because you're spending so much money, but your kid doesn't seem to develop, right? But I'm looking at the kids that develop are usually the ones that are like obsessed. It's not the kid that, is walking around the field uninterested. It's the kids that are so devoted that I guarantee you, if it really came down to it, they would figure out a way to make them be part of the team if finances were an issue. It's those players that parents compare their kid to. Like, why isn't my 8-year-old like that 8-year-old? Well, because that 8-year-old is obsessed with the sport. It's very straightforward. It's so obvious. Like, that kid, like your kid doesn't even watch games. Like, how you bring him to a training session 2 times a week for 2 hours, and the expectation is, like I said, based on the finances paid, not the time spent. You spend 2 hours training, of course it's expensive, but that's where people are not seeing the return, right? Again, I don't know. Mayor, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, going into what Danya said, it was really interesting how she brought up how she had that like kind of advantage physically. I was wondering, okay, did you see gaps in your game technically that you had to work hard on to kind of earn your spot and all that? Like, how was that? Where were gaps in your game when you first arrived to Europe?
I think the biggest thing was, I mean, and I was fortunate in my youth development to have had European coaches and South American coaches that had played in the World Cup and stuff like that. So it wasn't as dramatic as it was for some other people that I know, but just the thought, the tactical understanding of the game, you see, like I'm a small player, so my strengths were more I play out wide also, so 1v1 dribbling. I like having the ball at my feet, and of course, if you're in the US and you're technically good and you're fast, you can, every time you get the ball in the wing, you can beat the person 1v1 like down the wing, no problem. And the thing is that because I say my first experience in Europe was in Italy, which was for me fantastic because tactically I learned so much. I learned when you need to dribble and when you don't need to dribble, because yeah, you can beat them down the line each time, but then your game is very one-dimensional, and and when you come up against a good defender, maybe you don't beat her. So what can I do to free myself up with quick passes? For example, what position am I in on the field? I don't have to stay wide the whole time. When the center back gets the ball, I can cut in, receive the ball, and then make space for my winger to get behind me. There was a certain understanding of the game that I think really, for me, improved drastically when I got to Italy, and we would do things like 11 players against no defenders at all, just moving the ball the entire time. And other things like, as a forward, your movement sometimes is not to get the ball. Your movement can be just for the sake of freeing up someone else to be able to get the ball, making the defender get confused and have to make a split-second decision. And that the kind of depth that you just become so much more complete. Now, I mean, I still fancy a nutmeg on my best day, but when do I fancy that nutmeg? You know what I mean? So it's like I learned to choose the right times to dribble, choose the right times to lay off a quick pass. When should I drop to defend a little bit more? It just, that was so much. I have such a more profound understanding of the game now, and it's actually so much easier to play because you don't, sometimes I run less in a game, but I touch the ball more because I know where I need to be. I know that I don't have to make that run. I know if I drop here, I'm going to give the defender too much stress. She's not going to play the ball. So I don't have to make this back and forth run. And the understanding is just something that, I mean, I learned so much as when I came over to Europe.
Cool. And
That was
that's
also
really
very long
interesting.
answer.
And yeah, no, that was great. And yeah, I feel, I mean, just that tactical awareness and everything is just lacking. Like, I feel like I had my first real coach who actually spoke about defensive shape when I was 16, which, I mean, by that age, game over, right? So I was wondering, okay, so then there's that change in Italy. I'm curious, what was it like then transitioning to Spain or Germany? Like, how do the different styles differ? Like, what did you have to learn there, or how did you have to adapt your game? Like, I'm curious to see, the differences in all the countries, and then yeah.
I think between Italy and Spain, there was a little bit less of, maybe the main difference was that I was in Spain in the tiki-taka era, and that was when Barcelona, the women's side, was really implementing their push into women's football. So you could see the way they were playing, and then kind of everybody was trying to almost emulate that kind of style of play. So it was a very much a possession based style of play, very much attacking, a little less, not no focus, but a little bit less focus on defense. Where when I was playing in Italy, the first focus was, make sure that the defensive shape is there. We keep the defensive shape, and that's very important, and we build the play. In Spain, it was a lot of possession, but kind of like a free-flowing attack with a lot of small passes, creating those kinds of triangles. And honestly, for me, I enjoyed playing in Spain a lot. It was like a fantastic experience. And then let's say in Norway, the game was a lot more similar at the time to more of a North American style, is very strong, very fast, very direct style of play, which didn't really suit my game personally. I mean, I did learn, I think you got to take every experience you have and take it as a tool to put in your toolbox. If you like it or you don't like it, you never know when you might need it, and so there it was very very go long balls, fighting a lot for balls. And in Germany it's more of, I mean, we all, I think we all have this kind of, we see the way the German national team plays in the 4-2-3-1 system, and there's a lot of focus on keeping the ball. It's kind of like a mix, because they do like big strong players, and they do also like to keep the ball. A lot of teams don't like to just kick the ball away. They do like to focus on keeping the ball. So it's kind of a mix. And then Germany is also a place where they really put a lot of emphasis on young talent and developing that young talent, giving young players a chance to step into first teams, even though they could make mistakes. But it's not uncommon here to see a 16-year-old debut in the Bundesliga, for example. So there's a lot of focus on like the development. You'll have less of a, like my coach, for example, is like, which is fantastic. I don't mind if you guys make mistakes. You will make mistakes. That's how you get better. That's how you learn. And whereas in kind of in Italy, it was a little bit more like, I trust the older players, the more experienced players, because I know they're probably not going to make as many mistakes as a young player. You know what I mean? So each place has its own specific, well, they have small differences.
But it seems like I keep going back to that sustainable style of play. It seems like, and for a while, I mean, at least I'm referring more on the male side, but Germany seemed like they figured it out, right? things started to kind of fall off recently, and I guess let's just say France kind of maybe perfected that style of like technical but fast but strong, and that's what it's coming down to. And you said it best. You have to have that tool bag ready to go, because what happens if there's an opportunity to go to Italy, right? Okay, so I'm going to play this fashion, right? And you see it in pros all the time. The most adaptable players can go and play in every league. Some players struggle, and some players are only able to play in certain leagues. But it comes down to a level of, how diverse are you as a player? And sure, you should always make sure that your physical attributes are there. But when you start to take care of yourself on the ball, it just seems like you get to play in more enjoyable cultures. I find that, like, even in like you said, in the women's side, it must be nice to play for a Spanish team that moves the ball, that keeps the ball, versus, let's say, a Swedish team that maybe you're just, your style of play is strictly towards those physical players. And most likely you as a player are going to attract certain coaches. You're probably going to get opportunities and offers from certain teams that suit, your style. So I would encourage players to really understand that the way that you decide to play the game is most likely going to determine whether you are, getting opportunities in technical countries, in countries that are just strength based. Those are kind of my takeaways from that.
Yeah, definitely. I think also you as a player, when you are looking for where you need to, or where you would like to be playing, you also need to pay attention to those kinds of things. What kind of player am I? What is what kind of a system, what kind of a team, what kind of an environment is more suited to my style of play? Because, I went to Norway. I'm glad I went to Norway, but like looking back at it, was it really the best decision for me at the time? I learned a lot, of course, but I struggled a lot because I was like, I'm not happy here, because this is not the way I see football. This is not the way I enjoy playing football. And I think people are so like, I just want to take this offer because, yeah, it's this offer. Great. But kind of, if you have the luxury, if you have the chance, of course, if you only have one opportunity, take it by all means and make the best of it. But if you have a choice to look and see, okay, do I want to go here? Do I want to go there? Try to look at that. Even in D1, for example, teams play different styles. Look at the team you're talking to. Look at the school you're talking to. How do they play? How does that coach see the game? Does that fit with my style? Because if you just go based on one factor, or think, oh, is this a top 20 ranked team in the nation? Then you get there and you're like, what kind of a choice did I make? Because I'm a small technical player and we're playing kick and run football. So these are important decisions you have to make as a player too.
Very true. Yeah, I think that's so important. Mayor, anything?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of good insight there, and I like learning about, the experiences, different cultures. I definitely noticed, like in Germany, how they're not afraid to give youngsters a chance, and I think, we could learn about that pretty much everywhere. Like that it's okay to make mistakes. I know that, and this is embarrassing, but I've seen in youth in Canada, coaches are like desperately trying to win under 13 games or under 12 games and just not allowing players to make mistakes. And it's pretty embarrassing. Like that's where they should be making mistakes so they can learn. But anyways, so that's one tangent. With the remaining time, I kind of wanted to go into a bit of the journalism, sports journalism, kind of how that happened, and different career. How was that, and what did you learn about the game in that? Obviously, you have to look at the game with a different lens. You got to talk about it a lot. You got to analyze a lot. So obviously, you must have learned a lot there.
Yeah, so I got into it almost not, it wasn't really my plan, and then the opportunity presented itself and I kind of made the most of it. I was contacted to like be an expert on a World Cup show in 2018, and then it just kind of like built from there. But I think the fact that I play football, there's always this kind of like tension between journalists and pundits and players, and it's almost like, and for me, I identify as a player who talks about football, and it's important for me to give that kind of what's the word I'm looking for, that kind of spin or that kind of idea to the work that I do, which I think it allows me to, for example, if I'm interviewing a player, it allows me to connect better with the player, because I kind of, I know what they go through, and, how they look at the game. And, after a game, to ask a player, how did you feel when you missed the game-winning penalty? Like, what are they going to say to you? For me, those kind of questions are they bother me, because I know how it feels when you're a player and you get that question. Like, what am I going to answer to you? I'm pissed. Of course I'm pissed, So I think also, yeah, I think it's really important for me as a journalist to bring that kind of, different side to sports reporting. It was in Qatar at the World Cup, and it was important for me to not just to go past those basic questions that everybody asks, that you see every day on TV. And also, when we make documentaries or something, I actually did one, how to become a professional football player, which was like a series of the things that players have to do that are not glamorous, but the things that are totally necessary, like, strength and conditioning, nutrition, finding an agent, how to have a trial. So I think I look at the game still in my job. I think maybe playing football helped me more in my job than my job helped me playing football, because it allowed me to like take that as a player and make it deeper.
Yeah. I think it's so. I like that. We're kind of closing in on this episode with that. That the fact that good football has given you so much, and I think it's so important that, especially now, beyond professional opportunities on the field, there's just seems like so many routes that you can explore, and it's nice to see that it doesn't end. Like, even if it's a natural ending of a career where you've just played and you've run your course, or something were to happen that you physically can't participate anymore, but it's nice to see that there's so many opportunities and so many routes. And yeah, I think that you bring in so many valid points that I hope that there's parents, coaches, players that can just really sit down and take notes, and approach their kids' development a little bit better. I think we unpacked a lot of things, and from me, I just want to say thanks for sitting down with us, and I'll let Mayor close in the episode.
Yeah, cool. To finish off, I guess, Danya, you said a lot of different pieces of advice. I guess if you could summarize a key advice for players at home, they want to make it in pro, they're young, they're hungry, maybe summarize some key advice to them, and then maybe give some advice where to go if you want to get some really high quality off-season training.
All right. So I think my biggest advice to young players would be, and parents who might be watching this, would be, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to make sacrifices, and you have to do the things that are not comfortable. You have to get out of your comfort zone, and you have to work on the less glamorous things. I don't like to do shots with my left foot 600 times a day, but I'm going to do them. Those are the basics. You need to be able to say, I'm not going to be going out with my friends tomorrow because I have a training session. You have to be able to give up a lot of things that you might want to do and you can't do. And also, parents, if your kids are not playing, make them do the work. Make them go to their coach and ask them, what can I do better? Why am I not playing? Because everybody thinks, of course, that they are the best player, that they should be playing, that their child should be playing. But hear what the coach says, and actually make them realize that, okay, because you might have to work on this. And that's what you have to do to get to the next level. Okay. And don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. If you want an opportunity, call a coach. Hey, can I come try out with your team? Hey, give me a chance. And then make it happen, because that's how it is when you get to Europe. Here, if you want to be here, it's about fighting for what you want, your goals. And that is so important. It's not easy. So don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. Get out of your comfort zone and never stop believing in yourself if you think that you have what it takes to make it. And in the off-season training, I mean, I might be a little biased, but I've been working with Mario for a while. And for me, I mean, I'm waiting for my new program, actually. It should be coming soon, right?
He's busy.
But
He's
yeah,
busy. He
It's
must be
coming.
busy.
It's coming.
I know he's busy. I'm like ready to go. He's like, what do you want? I'm like, I want to jump higher. I want to run faster. I want to be stronger because when the season starts in March, I got to come out flying. So I work with Mario and I've had great results, but I think having someone like you who understands the game of football, understands what I need as a player and how the game's played, it helps me a lot because I don't have to worry about my training. I know, okay, what I have and what, I look at my program, I say, okay, this is what I have to do. I know that it's going to make me better. I don't even have to worry about it. And so that's comfortable to find that kind of person that can identify with you and your needs as a player. So
that's awesome.
Awesome. See, towards the end of her career,
I'm waiting for my new program, by the way.
and still hungry and still demanding. Good. So
Final
that's
message.
another lesson.
Final message to players, just, you really have to put it in your own hands. Listen to valuable information. We try to bring in people that are going to add value. And to close off, thank you so much, Danya, for sitting with us. And we wish you the best. And hopefully there is a second episode in the making. We can catch up later on.
Cool. Thank you guys for having me.
No problem.
Awesome. Thank you, Danya.
Take care, guys. All the best.
See you.